Welcome, everyone, to the Rosie and Bill Show. Our guest this week launched his career in stand-up comedy when he was 19 years old, and he's been making people laugh ever since. And he's also a guy who's never forgotten where he came from, that Philadelphia suburb known as Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Joe Matarese, welcome to the show, sir.
Funny, funny. How are you?
Oh, Joe, any better it would be illegal, my friend. Glad to have you and looking forward to this conversation and really just having a chance to talk about your journey thus far, look ahead a little bit. And I thought we'd also have to do something else, and that's talk some Philly sports.
Oh, yes, yes. The baseball season, I can't wait. Yesterday I was annoyed. I was ready to yell at the people at Verizon, my cable company, because I can't get the MLB network anymore. All of a sudden it's not there. It's gone. It used to be part of the sports package on my cable. And I wanted to watch some of the preseason Phillies, to just kind of get a feel of who the new guys are, what they're doing, because I don't live in that Philly
Oh,
South
that's
Jersey
right.
area anymore.
Yeah.
So I miss a lot of the local radio and all that. Even though you can get it with apps, I do
Yeah.
listen. I'm sure you do listen to like sports talk radio.
I do from time to time, but I have to admit, I was a big fan of Angelo Cataldi. I was a big fan of
Yeah.
Howard Eskin, some of the guys that have been
Is
around
Howard
forever.
Eskin gone?
He's gone, but he's actually just launched his own show.
Oh, I loved
So he's kind of gone from 0 to 60 on social media, really looks like he's building a following really quickly. And he's got, I think he
for
had
your
more.
national people that are watching. You should know that Howard Eskin is kind of like, I call him the Philly version of Chris Russo, Mike
Yeah.
Mad Dog Russo, where one of those guys that was entertaining at the way he would get mad at people. And I loved a guy like that because I related. I have a little of that anger. I love how he would just hang up on people nope, click,
Yeah. Yeah.
nope,
We call him a dope, moron, click.
nitwit, dope. Great,
Nitwit.
love
Yeah.
that guy.
No, Howard he is still, I think he's still the king and still doing it and probably still working 20 hours a day too. But anyway, because I years ago I had worked at Channel 2 in Delaware, so I got to cross paths with Howard and I was doing sports and Gary Papa was another great guy, but Howard was everywhere. It was amazing how he was just everywhere. But hey, everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate each and every one of you. And we also appreciate our first and longest running sponsor of the show, Tom and his team of insurance professionals at the Malin Agency. If world-class customer service and doing business with someone you can trust is important to you, give Tom and his team a call today for all your insurance needs. I know you're up in New York now. So if we were to kind of jump in the DeLorean, travel back in time, and then maybe head south on the Jersey Turnpike, I think to maybe like exit 4-ish to
Or
Cherry Hill. Yeah. So what was it like growing up in Cherry Hill?
Cherry Hill, well, it's not anything like, I'm going to sound like the old guy. It's so different there now. There was so much more personality in Cherry Hill than now, especially because we had I don't know if you even know this. You look around my age. I'm 57.
Yeah, well, that'll work. That'll work. Yeah.
You're around there.
Yeah.
So do you remember the Garden State racetrack? There was
Oh,
a
yeah.
Okay, so the Cherry Hill Garden State racetrack, I think was the center of what gave Cherry Hill, New Jersey that personality back in the 70s. And it's a shame that I got there a little late. So in the 60s, there was a place that probably fed off of that racetrack also, which was the Latin Casino,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
right? So Cherry Hill was like a mini Atlantic City at one time, which
Yeah.
I didn't realize till I was older and I started, doing research, So, and then when I saw the movie Goodfellas, it reminded me of Cherry Hill when they were burning down all the restaurants because there was all Italian restaurants all off of the garden. There was we had Circles in Cherry Hill, right? So there was the
Oh
Garden
yeah.
State Racetrack, which was the circle there, and then all these Italian restaurants going down the road right off of that, and they slowly would just be burning down. Just like Goodfellas. There was a Valentino's and a Sinelli's. I still remember these places. There was a big Holiday Inn where my parents got married. Uh, all these places, and then all those venues where you could go see A-list celebrities. Oh, there were so many of them, and I was like, oh, that sucks that I got into entertainment, and by the time I was an entertainer, none of that was there. It was all Atlantic City made it all go out of business also. So that racetrack, I remember it. And even the racetrack burnt down a couple times.
Oh yeah, that's right. But yeah, and I'm as you know, I remember the Latin Casino. I'm trying to remember when that even shut down or closed down, but I know it's been decades.
It probably closed down in the 70s because I remember when we moved there. I was born in 67, so we moved there when I was 5 in the early 70s, and it was already gone. It was probably like a dance club. That place became like this huge, you would see a lot of, that's another thing that doesn't exist in today's world, is these clubs where you'd see bands and they weren't
Oh
playing
yeah.
covers, like they were new original bands. You'd see Springsteen at the beginning, you'd see Bon Jovi at the beginning of his career, and there were all kind of clubs where you'd see live bands doing original music, not tribute bands like you see now. Like, where
Yeah.
do you go see a young up and coming original artist unless you live in Nashville? Like, that's why I've always thought that would be a really cool place to live, because you get this, that music becomes the
Yeah.
personality of the town. So it it was fun, and Philadelphia was scary to us also. If you lived in Cherry Hill, like, because I had those Italian parents that were always like, "Don't go to Philly," like I was always told like you were going to
You
get
might
robbed.
not come back.
Yeah, you're going to get killed or robbed. We had the speed line right there. You could take the above the track, above the
Oh
ground
yeah,
train.
over to
You
Ben
would go,
Franklin.
yeah, go over to Ben Franklin Bridge and in. But unless you were going to a Phillies game or an Eagles game, really, my parents didn't want us on that train either. So I didn't start stand up in Philly until I was 19. Basically, I would have started at 15 or 16 if I knew it was there, but my parents never brought us to Philly. I had no idea there was 2 comedy clubs right in Philadelphia where you could do it as an amateur, as an open mic. And once I found out at 19, that became my home immediately, and I never missed a week. I mean, I found the one thing that I liked pretty early. I'm lucky, I
Yeah,
guess.
that's one of the things, Joe, about your background that really fascinates me is kind of, getting that start at such a young age and just having the guts to go for it. I mean, did you have a plan B at all or a fallback when you kind of launched into it?
Well, when I launched into it, I was going to community college. I was never a good student. I had learning disabilities that I didn't know were learning disabilities. I had no idea. You were just dumb back then. You were dumb. You were the dumb kid. My friends would make fun of me. I used to, still to this day, they tell stories of how I would talk about South Jersey when you'd be coming from Atlantic City or the Jersey Shore, and you had to you get on the Jersey Parkway there, and you'd have to get on the Atlantic City Expressway. They would be behind me going, "He's going to miss the exit. I know he's going to miss the exit." And then boom, I would go right by it. And they were just like, ah. And they still bring it up to this day when I get together with them, because they said I would miss that exit every time almost. So, yeah, I had these learning disabilities and make me very, very terrible on the roadways. I got lots of tickets, lots of car
And
accidents.
that's before Waze and Google Maps too.
Yeah, yeah. I probably, that's why I was such a bad driver back then. Yeah, I was probably looking down at a map. If you got ADD, you can't look down at a map and drive. You're going to hit somebody. So the backup plan, I mean, I guess I was always very entrepreneurial. So the backup plan is going to sound pathetic, but it's funny because my 2 friends are still doing it, and they turned it into a pretty big business. When I was young, right around when I started stand up, I started doing like DJ stuff first.
Hmm.
You always hear, like, I used to do a joke about, if you're Italian and from Jersey, you can try to not become a DJ, but there's no way around it. You're going to have crates of records and two turntables in the back of your hatchback at some point. So at 18, I started DJing at these like bowling alleys when you used to have to get on the microphone and call out the colored pins when people
Oh
couldn't pin a
yeah.
free thing, you know? And I would be talking on the mic, and I would tell jokes sometimes when I was DJing. And I started to have my own business doing that. I was always really good at being entrepreneurial. I would go into these clubs and bars. I would talk them into hiring me as the DJ. And, but, I had like probably working 4 or 5 nights a week. Then I was doing weddings and parties and all of that. And then, typical of me, it's probably one of my positives and my negatives. I am a people person, but I always would bring others into what I was doing.
Hmm.
So two of my best friends that were the guys making fun of me for missing those exits, they would they started DJing too. And now we had a company together, right? And I've told this story on stage. I'm DJing a wedding, and and someone made a request to hear some Rolling Stones, Brown Sugar, it might have been, and he wanted to dedicate it to his wife. And my friend, who was my partner at the time, went to the bathroom. While he was at the bathroom, I played Rolling Stones, Brown Sugar, and did the request and did the dedication. And the guy comes running over. He goes, "No, no, 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 no! My wife's outside. My wife's outside. She didn't hear it." And that like comedy in me struck, and I go, "She's outside. Doesn't she know you can go to the bathroom inside?" Right? I said it with a straight face, and I thought it was funny. Nobody thought it was funny. And
Especially
I,
his girlfriend.
no, he didn't. And then my partner comes back, and I go, "Oh, you missed it. I just said the funniest thing." And I go, and I told him what I said, and he goes, "You didn't say that." And I go, "Yeah, I did. It's funny, right?" And he goes, "Joe," and I've told this on stage. He literally did this. He goes, "You got to make a decision, man. Are you a comedian? Or are you a DJ?" It's just hilarious. Sounds like like an after school special moment, right? And I went, "Okay, I'm not. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to carry back then crates of records up steps. I don't want to be a radio DJ on the radio. I really don't want to do that." I thought in my head, because I do have this deep voice, and people used to always say, "You got a voice for radio. You should be on the radio." And believe it or not, I wanted to be more like an introducing guy, like, because I have this deeper voice. I used to do this in my basement growing up, is do those announcer guys. I go, "How do you get that job? I want to be the guy who
Yeah,
says,
Michael Buffer.
like a Michael Buffer, or
Yeah.
even like, I always wanted to be one of those guys, ladies and gentlemen, the 75th Oscars, like that guy, the Golden Globe, introducing the award for Best Supporting Actress." I wanted to be that, and I never knew a way to get that job.
Wow.
I remember recording my voice, talk about entrepreneurial and having no fear. I made these stupid recordings because, probably like a cassette player where you had to hit record and play at the same time. Recorded my voice doing all these different voices and handed it to a guy at a dance club in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. It was called Franchine's. This guy Frank Cerami. You might even know that name. He was always on Power 99 FM.
Oh yeah.
Frank Cerami. He was DJing at the club, Monday nights. It was like packed. And I go, "Sir, I want to do voices and blah, blah, blah." And I handed him my cassette. And oh my God. Yeah, I never heard from that guy ever again. I can't even believe I did that. But I was good at talking and getting hired to do all these things. And then I just stopped the DJing completely, probably because of one friend of mine who quit soon after doing stand up. at the community college. He told me he was doing stand up at this open mic in Philadelphia on 2nd and Chestnut Street at the
Hmm.
Comedy Works. And you could sign up on Wednesdays. They give you a 5 minute slot, and anyone can do it. And I went, oh my God. And then I went, and immediately I just went, oh my God, everybody here is like me. We're all weird. They always call it like an open mic night. I probably heard comedians on the show. We call it like we're the island of misfit toys. You know? You see all these weirdos, but for some reason you go, we're all kind of similar in a way. I could feel it. I could feel the similarity. And it did help. I met one guy really fast that I hit it off with, and we became really good friends. He passed away at a young age. In his 50s, he passed away. He stopped doing comedy after about 10 or 12 years. But I always used to say to him, I go, dude, if it wasn't you becoming friends with me, I might have let my insecurities rule what I wanted to do. And I might have bailed. I might have quit. Like having that one friend, because I didn't really get, even like I said, everybody was similar and weird, but
Yeah.
I didn't find them. You find this out years later. I didn't find them easy to make friendships with. And still to this day, I have a certain amount, a small amount of stand-up comedian friends, but most of them, I don't connect. There's no connection. I don't
That's
know.
interesting.
I don't know what it is. I'm like, I don't get it. And it's usually the
Do you
guys
think there's a
doing the best
competition,
in the
maybe?
business. What?
Do you think, Joe, maybe there's like a competition or something, or fear of competition, something like that, maybe?
No, I think it's the comedy mind. I think a lot of comedians
Hmm.
would say the guys that are on the more normal side, you know, the guys that get married and have kids and want to own a home, like those guys are a different breed in the comedy world than some of the other guys that are like more oddball, more socially awkward. You hear that a lot, you know, you hear the word autistic now a lot, right? That
Hmm.
word really
Yeah.
didn't exist when we were coming up. And I've heard it talked about that. I bet a lot of comedians are a little bit on the spectrum because they're social. A lot of them are socially slightly off. They're not like completely autistic where you know someone's autistic, but you're like, this guy's not looking at me when I'm talking to him. Another thing that happens is sometimes you'll have a relationship with guys that won't have that oddness. You become friends. I notice this. Then the competitive thing comes in. If they start to get big, they're not, they're sometimes they're hard to stay friends with. You're like, what just happened? We were friends. I'm pretty sure we were friends. Our wives, we went out together with our wives. Our kids know each other. What just happened? And then you don't hear from them ever again. Sometimes they're very protective of their fame. The other thing is they're afraid you're going to bother them and ask them for favors and all that,
Hmm.
like that, or money. You know, they think you're going to ask them for money. You know, so there's a lot of variables that I always say, because like I've opened for guys like Sebastian Maniscalco and Bill Burr in my career at big stadiums, you know, at Wells Fargo in Philly, 18,000 people. And people will go, how come you're not always opening for him? Why don't you tour with him? And
Hmm.
I go, because there's a guy who really is his real best friend, who's his best friend. I go, unless you're somebody's best friend in show business, yeah, they're not going to pull you along. You know, they're not going to help you out. They're not helping out everybody. You got to be his genuine best friend. Like you mentioned Justin McKinney earlier.
Yeah.
Like Justin and I are really good friends. Like we've really started together and were roommates at one time in Los Angeles and
Huh.
basically roommates in New York City in Astoria, Queens. So like he's someone, if one of us got really big, that we would help each other. But other than Justin, there's probably I don't have another comedian that I'd go, he's the guy that I would help or he would help me.
Wow. Yeah.
It's rare.
And it's funny, Joe. One of the questions I was going to ask you was, maybe some of the lessons that you learned along the way, and it kind of sounds like that's one of them. That it's in terms of just those relationships, and sometimes those are the most critical piece.
I'm noticing it now. it changed. Like when you it was a very solo game, comedians back when I came up before social media. I started comedy in like 89, 90. Um, you had to hang out with these people, and comedians were more into just trying to make it on their own. And then when I'm noticing in the last 5 to 10 years, you see a lot of these comedians like Joe Rogan's a great example. Look at all the comedians that he launched off of his podcast that were his friends. That going on that show could really help comedians. And I wasn't in that world. I was not in Los Angeles. That they were mostly LA guys. And so and you see a lot of these guys now that help each other out. You can, even Instagram, you can collaborate, right? You can
Oh
do a
yeah.
collaboration post, and now you'll see guys, they'll have podcasts together, and they'll both of them are getting big and they're helping each other. And then this guy's big. You hear Shane Gillis is a name in the Philly area
Yeah.
who got really big and has helped some of his peers that were other Philly comics, I guess. I never really had that guy. Artie Lang was kind of, I would say he was my guy at one time, who was big, and I was in his entourage.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, he was helping me, but the drugs and the alcohol with him kind of, made that whole I haven't talked to him in a long time. Like he just kind of vanished. He just kind of fell off the face of the earth. We were close friends at a time. I was living across the street from him in Hoboken. And when he was on the Howard Stern show, and I was touring with him all over, and he was taking care of me, and there were some really exciting times, and
Yeah.
then the drugs just took him down completely, and kind of disappeared. So you can't fake those relationships, though. That's the thing,
Yeah.
that you can't go, hey, I'm going to become friends with the most talented comedians. Like you can't fake it. And I would love to know, why do I really connect? That'd be a good one for the show. Why do I really connect with some of the guys that haven't made it big, and the guys that I started with that got really big aren't my best friends?
Hmm.
What is that?
Well, yeah, I think sometimes it's maybe, it's more about them than you, so to speak. But I also think that it's really about I guess, what their agenda is at a given time.
Well, you'll
Um,
hear this, your wife, like if you have a wife or a best friend who you brought into the world, and they're looking at it from a different lens. Because I heard you mentioned Steve Rinaldi earlier. He said this to me, that his wife once said, and I won't say the comedian she said it about. She goes, he's not your friend. He's not your real friend. Like your wife can notice it.
hmm.
There's a barrier sometimes. Like they're your friend, but you know who your really good friends are. Like the guys that would take a bullet for you. You kind of know who they are. And there's no way to fake that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and as you're saying all this, Joe, one of the things that comes to mind with me is that it was within the last couple of years that Rosie and I really started having more and more comedians on the show, and then I started having the opportunity to meet some of them in person and really interact with them more. And I just noticed there were certain people, and Justin was one of them, just really genuinely good people, and I felt like in some cases, I was kind of being led into the club a little bit, in terms of just with the relationship piece and the kind of conversations we had. And it's one of the things that motivated me to take the class. And when we talked before we started recording about Steve Rinaldi, I was talking about how Steve's one of the instructors at the class that I'm taking. And, being from Southwest Philly and Delco, I got held back. So I had to take the class again, a second time. So I'm
You
doing
got
it
held
again.
back in comedy class.
Yeah.
That's
But
hilarious.
yeah, but I'm having a great time, and Steve's a great guy. Jay Yoder, the other instructor's a great guy. Joel Richardson, the club owner, great guy. So I see what you're saying, and I just really I value just some of the relationships I've been able to build, above and beyond the show with some of these great people. And it's rare, but it's pretty damn cool when it happens.
Yeah, it's true. And it is fun. Like I had that the other night when I still go into New York City and do spots, as we call them in New York City. Spots. I got a spot. So I went into the comic strip, and within 5 minutes, there was like 4 or 5 different comedians that I kind of started in New York City with, and they were there. And when you know that it's such a fun feel. It must be like if a band broke up and they all meet each other again. They got stories.
Oh
They
yeah,
got
reunion tour.
Yeah, it's really fun when that does happen. I mean, why Seinfeld made that show, Comedians in Cars. I mean, I do love talking to stand-up comedians, even when they are socially awkward.
Yeah.
I have friends that I'm like, this dude. I know comedians that have never had a girlfriend in their whole life. I'm like, in your whole life, they're not gay. They just can't have a. They've never had a relationship. You hear that one, you're like, can you imagine? Like, there's something off,
Wow.
but hilarious on stage. He could be so funny on stage, but he's never been in a relationship in his whole life. And he's in his late 50s. I know a few of those comedians, and they're just like,
Wow.
you know,
Yeah, I'm just
maybe
kind
if
of
they
thinking.
got rich and famous, their socialness could be so weird, but a woman would still want to marry him. So if they don't make it, they don't have a shot at a relationship. It's weird. You would think they'd meet someone else who'd be socially off
Yeah.
too. And
And a lot of people list having a good sense of humor at the top of their priorities and what they're looking for in somebody, right?
yeah, but if you can't have that, I mean, I've been seeing a therapist for 30 years. Well, let me think. Not has it been 30? No, because I've been married for 20. So I'm way off on the age. I've been seeing him about 20 years because I started seeing him when I was dating my wife, and he sees all these comedians. And the number one thing I have to work on, and I bet all comedians naturally have to work on it, and why they have this indifference is he says you weren't in the moment, you weren't connected. He uses that word. A lot of people do meditation now,
Huh.
right? Because they say it keeps them connected. It keeps them from worrying. Like if you're worrying about the next thing and the next thing, you're not like in that, you're not in the present moment. And a lot of comedians, I don't think, are in that
Hmm.
present moment. So when you're talking to them, they're not really there. So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You could feel it. It's like when you've been on a bad radio show with someone where there's no connection versus when you're on with someone who's, you know, there's a connection. You know it. I'm sure you've had to interview people. You're like, I mean, you said you named a lot of the good ones. There had to be some interviews where you're like, I can't connect with this guy. This is like work.
Well, yeah, and one of the cool things, Joe, is that a lot of people will say like, "Oh, did I ramble too much or did I talk too much?" I'm like, "No," because I like to go where the conversation takes us. So the toughest interview for me is I'll ask an open-ended question, just trying to, generate some good conversation, and it's like, "Yep," or "Nope," or "I think so." Okay. Let me see. And I try to not have too many prepared notes because that way I can just go where things go. But yeah, you're
Right.
right. That is a very uncomfortable uh, feeling when there's maybe no connection. Or I've also had situations where they've started out slow because I think maybe they had just come off of an interview where somebody was kind of a jerk or like, and people have told me even afterwards, oh, I thought you were going to, try a gotcha question or something like, who were you talking with before me? Like what? So,
That's
this,
most podcasts these days because that's what
yeah, they're
does
trying to get
well.
the
That's what
pop.
does well.
Yeah. And you know what? And I've heard that, from other people too. And it'll be a slower ride, if you will, but it'll be the right kind of ride because I will never ever, do that. And before I switch gears to into our next topic, I just want to say this because it stands true to this day. When we launched this show in early 2018, a big motivator was to have a place on social media where people could go for positive, inspirational content.
Yeah.
and where you just have great conversations. So that's pretty much it. And all these years and hundreds of episodes later, that ain't changing. But what is going to change is the subject at hand, because I thought we definitely need to dive in a little bit to some Philly sports. Um, and I wanted to start with the Eagles. So I know the Phillies are in preseason or spring training right now, but yesterday, after doing nothing, we finally signed a free agent, and it's a backup running back, AJ Dillon. Like, what do you think about the Eagles' moves? Like, we've lost multiple starters from the defense. Our backup quarterback, not that big of a deal. But what do you think? You think there's going to be a big splash at some point, or are you happy with what's been going on?
Well, it's funny that you said that because I said that kind of at the top of the interview. I miss out on all these little things from being up here.
Oh, that's
And
right.
probably one of the reason is that I miss out is when I'm, and I haven't, that's another joke that I do on stage. Why I love living in that Philly area is how everybody's in the know of everything that you
Yeah.
walk down. You probably saw me do the joke where the old lady is like going, "What did Bryce Harper
Oh,
swear?"
yeah, the 94-year-old lady.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So when you're down living in that area, everybody's talking about it. You're listening to it on the radio, then you're getting out of your radio and everybody's talking to each other. Why'd they sign this guy? Why'd they do that? When I'm up here, dude, everything you just said, and my brother makes fun of me. He's like, "What do you live in a bubble?" I'm like, I don't know. I don't have the conversations that you're having. So I didn't know they lost their backup quarterback.
Yeah, yeah, they traded.
But the third string quarterback was better than the second
Yeah, yeah,
string.
he's really good. That kid Tanner McKee, he's good. He's got some
Yeah, I like
potential.
him. Who was the second string
Kenny
quarterback?
Pickett.
Pickett. That's right. Yeah, we
Yeah,
made jokes about Pickett.
yeah, yeah. So Kenny Two Gloves is now in Cleveland. But okay, so let's
So
switch
they
gears to,
took so they pick up a backup running back.
yeah, AJ Dillon. I think he was with Green Bay, maybe.
Did they lose any of their other running backs?
No, I don't know that they're going to re-sign Gainwell. They'll probably let him go.
I liked him.
And Will Shipley, the rookie's really good too. But
Shipley's good too.
the league, if you really look at it, Joe, I think over the last probably 10 years, they just don't seem to put much of a premium on running backs, which I think is kind of a mistake. And they become like interchangeable parts in a system, I think, in most cases. But I think as Saquon proved this year, if you got a good one, you take care of them, block for them, and beautiful things can happen.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm more of a realist sports fan. I'm not that insane Philly fan, you know. I'm kind of in the middle there a little. Like I know how hard it is to win a Super Bowl and then win a Super Bowl again the next year. Like it's you gotta get so lucky to have that happen because you lose people and
Yeah.
the chemistry changes. It's like chemistry is basically what our conversation was just about.
Yeah.
When you have chemistry with a person and you don't, it's the same with teams. So you pull one thing out. I mean, we're losing the offensive coordinator. We lost the offensive coordinator.
Oh, yeah. Kellen Moore. Yeah. He got the
That's
head coach of
that
the
that's
Chiefs.
a huge piece to be gone. So I mean, I don't expect them to win the Super Bowl again, even though because you're pulling all these pieces and you're moving it around. It's like me when I do an hour special, and then you see these comedians come around and try to do another hour special the next year. There's a good chance that one's going to suck. If the last one was amazing, it's really hard to do it again.
It's interesting you said that because
They were incredible. They weren't just good. I mean, they were incredible.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And to your point about, winning two in a row, like the Chiefs would have been the first team ever to win three in a row. So in all this,
How hard
we've
that
had
is.
59 Super Bowls and no one's ever won more than two in a row, even back in the 70s and 80s when there were dynasties.
Yep, that shows you. So, yeah, you gotta. It's just like anything. You almost need to go down to come back up again. So
Yeah. And what you were saying about like
watch
the
them be
special,
1-16.
no, no, I don't think we'll fall that far, but
No.
but it would be fun to listen to sports radio in Philly if we did. But
Oh my God.
But just real quick, I wanted to touch on what you were saying with the specials. I'm trying to remember who it was, but he told me, he said, you have your whole life to work on your first special, and then they're going to want you to come up with another one in a year, or every year thereafter type of thing. And I just started thinking about that and thought about it when you said that, just how, and now I have such an appreciation for how hard it is to come up with 5 minutes of funny. An hour? Oh my God, that is amazing. Absolutely. And speaking of which, by the way, um, your two recent specials, Mullets and Mixtapes, and Almost Sold Out, both awesome, folks. If you haven't seen them yet, you got to check them out. And if you're in that, what is it, 40 to 65 age group, especially,
Mhm.
I think you'll really appreciate it. And I do have to say this, if you have a copy, electronic copy of that picture of you and your mullet, I have one from the 80s where I got it permed in the back too.
You permed it too?
Yeah, I can put a little side by side. That might break the internet.
Hilarious. That's
And just so you
hilarious.
know, I had it done.
Who permed yours?
A woman, I lived in Morton in Delaware County. It was a woman across the street. She talked me into it because the next day I was auditioning at the Monster Factory in Swedesboro, New Jersey to be a WWF wrestler.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. Wait till you see the picture. I'll put that picture in here. It's let's just say that yeah, I'm 6'3", and back then I think I weighed about 235. And I went down there, Pretty Boy Larry Sharp and Don Maraca, all these big guys were there. They had 28 guys try out. Several left in an ambulance. It was
Really?
bad.
They
It
were
was,
getting hurt at the
oh God,
tryout.
yeah. Yeah, there were two guys left, me and one other guy. But
It's
they
like
wanted
they had an open call for wrestlers.
it was to get into the school, and then you'd be guaranteed one television match. And there was, this is going back to the 80s, but it was yeah. And unfortunately, I opted not to go any further because they wanted me to put on another 40 or 50 pounds and were giving me suggestions on how I could do that in a matter of weeks.
Weeks. What were their suggestions? Steroid.
Let's just say that it would have, yeah, yeah. I was perfectly fine with a dozen eggs and a pound of ground beef and a gallon of milk every day, but I wasn't going down that road. So that dream ended right then and there.
Wow.
But
Wow.
I do remember, I'll never forget that night, and it was scary because it may be predetermined, but man, it hurts. And if you don't get your feet down when you're getting suplexed and you land on your coccyx,
Holy shit. I mean, I love that movie, The Wrestler. I mean,
oh yeah,
that was amazing. And
yeah,
I even love the Springsteen song, The Wrestler.
oh yeah,
So
yeah, that was,
sad.
yeah, and it was yeah, let's just say uh, I'm glad I did it, but I'm also glad that I didn't do it anymore in the way that they wanted me to. So that said, I want to make sure I also touch on Joe so we talked about your two recent specials. You got anything in the works, touring specials, anything like that, the rest of 2025 that your fans can look forward to?
Well, it's funny you say that because I just got off the phone with the guy and I'm wearing his hat right now. This company, Ginger Ale. Um,
Okay.
so I've been really focusing lately and talk about the Eagles. It kind of happened organically. I wasn't really forcing it. I wasn't going, hey, I'm going to do a lot of material that's about Philly and South Jersey, right? But the Eagles going, through the playoffs and having that season that they had, I started posting a lot of Philly stuff about the Eagles. And it started to get me a lot more followers fast. Talk about you having to gain weight fast. All of a sudden, I was getting more followers. And I was like, wow, they really are jumping on this Philly stuff. So I was posting more and more and more. And then there was this theater that I did. I did it about 3 times. Once right before COVID, this theater in South Jersey called the Scottish Rite. It's a 1,000-seat theater. They have a lot of pretty big name bands come in there, but they don't do a lot of comedy. So I had done a couple of shows there where I did like door deals with the theater. and did pretty well because that's where my following is the best in that Philly, South Jersey area. And then it got to the point where they're like, the only way to do shows here is if you rent the theater. We only book the music acts to do regular
Hmm.
deals that aren't rentals. And this is how much. It's pretty pricey to rent it, right? And I was like, well, I'm gonna have to get a sponsor if I want to rent this thing. So everything with me, like we talked about connection
Yeah.
at the top here. I, I know fast when I'm in a situation with somebody that I like and we're connecting, and I know it with fans too. I could feel it with a fan. Like my fans that are that, they end up becoming my friends.
Hmm.
And we have relationships. They come to lots of shows. I have a guy in Delaware. He must have seen me 15 times, right? And he brings a lot of people all the time. Great guy. I'll say his name, Ron Poliquin. He's probably the biggest super fan out of anyone I have, right? But there's other guys out there that are like that, where we make this connection. And when I make the connection with them, sometimes we kind of do business together. So this one fan hit me up when he saw me at this theater in Pittman called the Broadway Theater, another 1,000-seat theater. And I did it the day after Christmas in 2024. I thought it was going to be dead, and it wasn't. It was. We had a lot of people there. I was like, damn, this is a good time to do a show between Christmas and New Year's. And Justin McKinney, who you've had on your show, it's kind of off of his model, which is he does 6 sold out shows between Christmas and New Year's in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Hmm.
And it's an 850 seat theater, I think. And he makes a really good amount of money in that week. And I was like, I would love to get something like that local for me. He's like, well, you got to start with one and then you got to build it. So this fan of mine goes, I know, he saw me at Pittman. He goes, when are you going to do Collingswood? I'm from Collingswood. And when are you going to do the Scottish Rite? And I said, I haven't gotten a booking there. And he's like, I know the woman. There's a new woman there who runs it, blah, 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 blah. He put an email together. The next thing I know, we're doing a show, but they go, we only rent for the non-comedic acts. And then the same guy goes, one of my friends owns a marijuana dispensary called Ginger Ale. It's around the block from that theater. I
Huh.
bet he'd want to sponsor you because he sponsored uh what you got wrestling in my head, not wrestling. You can tell I'm not. I don't watch Ultimate Fight. What's that
Oh yeah,
called?
UFC,
I don't
MMA.
watch UFC, so I don't. So, but he had sponsored fighters before this guy. He goes, maybe he'd want to sponsor the show there, and I bet he'd get tons of people to even come to the show because we know everybody in this town. They went to high school in the town that the theater's in. So so now they're sponsoring a whole bunches of things for me down in that area. And I feel like I'm friends with the guy. I was just on the phone with him for like an hour, coming up with different ideas and business and the show. And so that show, I mean, it's not that I'm promoting a show, it's not for sale yet. It's not till December 27th, the Saturday after Christmas, in 1,000 seats at that
Wow.
Scottish Rite Theater. That's going to be big. Really, the next tour shows that I have that are coming up for me is because these are you start to learn your areas where I connect the best. It's all Northeast, and then it's Florida, where
Hmm.
there are people that used to be in the Northeast.
Yeah.
So I'm doing like a bunch of shows in next month. I'm going to Miami, I'm going to Naples, Florida, and I'm going to Boca Raton. So I'm doing like 4 shows in Miami. I think it's like April 10th to the 13th. I'm doing shows in Miami. And then I go to April 16th to Naples, which I'm looking forward to. I've never performed
Oh
in
wow.
Naples,
Yeah.
and then Boca Raton on the 18th and 19th of April. All my
Nice.
stuff is like private this month, so I'd be
Okay.
promoting things.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, when you go down there, it's going to be people from Jersey and Pennsylvania, New York, or whatever in those areas is predominantly Northeast people anyway. So just kind of
Well, that's what's
reconnecting
great.
with the
Yeah,
relocated crowd.
like I said, all my social media now. is about the area,
Yeah.
and I start to realize that I think I said this to you off the podcast. I'm like, I got jokes I didn't even realize were about the area because
Yeah.
I'm just and it's just about my personality or something. And then I'm like, I bet I can give that a title that sounds like it's from the area. Like I posted something that was about my wife, me not really speaking the same language as my wife and my wife's family. They're more Midwestern. So I think I called the post no one no one likes us, but we don't care,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is
There
like
you
the
go.
Philly slogan,
That's
right?
the ultimate Philly slogan.
Yeah. You see it on t-shirts. It's
Yeah.
hilarious. Uh, yeah, that's another thing I think. I always click a lot with the comedians that are from the Philly area because there is a certain personality to it. I remember when I moved to San Diego. I lived there for a year when my wife was doing her internship for her PhD, and I snapped on somebody in the audience at the show who was heckling, and a total Northeast version of getting pissed off at somebody who's heckling you. And all the comedians were from San Diego, and they all looked at me like I was a freaking lunatic after the show. I was like, "What? That startled you?" They were like, "We don't do that here." I was like, "Oh, all right. I guess I'm more New Jersey, New York, Philly.
Yeah.
When you get pissed off, you know."
Absolutely. You never have to guess where we're coming from. I mean, I think
Oh,
that makes life easier, right? But well, Joe, listen, I'll tell you what, two things. One is I definitely want to have you back because I feel like there's like a million more things we could talk about. But I
definitely.
do have one last question I want to ask you for this part of our conversation. If you were to look back, go all the way back to when you were 19 and you started doing this, when you were DJing and doing comedy as a DJ, what would you say you're most proud of?
I thought you were going to say, what would you do different? But you're saying, what was I most proud of? There was not a
Yeah.
lot of proud moments. When I look back at the beginning, I'm so
Well, all
unproud
the
of
way
me.
through, if you were to use that as the starting line, and even though you're nowhere near the finish line, but if you just kind of look at your journey thus far, all the way
Well,
through today,
well, I
most
think,
proud.
and I get this a lot from the peers that I started with, even how I told you how I didn't always get along with everybody and how I would go to those open mics at 19 and get along with one guy, but not get along with the other 20. I've had a lot of those guys from the beginning that weren't nice to me come back around, like the few that stuck with the business. And
Huh.
a couple of them got really big and they've apologized to me because they go, you know what? You got good. Right? That's the one thing that I would say I'm proud of about me is that and I think that a lot of people that know me would agree is I have tenacity. And I think that is a Philly thing
Oh
too,
yeah.
is I got knocked down a lot and I was not good at this. I'll tell you for a fact. It took me so long to get decent and be myself up there. If I look at the beginning, I was not even, the tone of my voice wasn't even how I normally talked. I wasn't comfortable at just being who I really was. And that's what makes the audiences laugh is when you're comfortable in being exactly who you are. But I studied myself and I always was like I wasn't afraid to swing and miss and then learn from my mistake. And I'm still doing it as a 57-year-old. And I don't see me ever, I don't know, for me to stop doing this completely, I mean, something really crazy has to happen because it's just who I am. It's my identity. And so I think I would say I'd be, if I was like my outer self as a father looking at me, I would be say I'm proud of you for working at it so hard and keep refining it and keep
Yeah.
making yourself better.
No, there is absolutely something to be said for that, Joe. And I also think that the fact that you just said you don't see yourself not doing it, I think is also the definition of success. You're doing something that you love to do and you continue to hone your craft and get better at it. And when I look at the Hall of Fame talent that I've had the privilege of talking to, whether it's from the music world, sports world, whatever it may be, they all are still working at their craft. No matter how great they are, how much success they've had, they all are still working at it. So that to me is admirable and definitely something to be proud of. So again, I want to thank you for taking the time to visit with me today. I really look forward. I'm dead serious. We got to do this again soon because we got so many more things we can
Yeah.
talk about. And I don't know that I'll be able to make it to Florida, but I'm going to catch one of your local shows here, PA, Jersey, or something as soon as I possibly
There's
can.
lots of them. Yeah, I'm always in Emmaus, probably isn't far from me. I do
Okay.
that theater twice a year in Emmaus,
Okay.
PA.
Yeah, that's not too far from me. So, but yeah, look forward to doing that too and getting you back hopefully sometime soon to Soul Joel's in Pottstown because selfishly, that's only about a 10-minute drive.
Well, I'll definitely probably be there in the next 6 to 8 months. Hopefully, I'm in works with Joel putting dates together.
Awesome. Awesome. Glad to hear it. All
Yeah,
right. Well, Joe, thanks again so much. Appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. And folks, we thank you for watching. Couldn't do it without you. See you next week.
Man, I grew up in the 80s, everybody. And yeah. Yeah, man. It's hard when you grew up in that time and you're raising kids now. It just gets frustrating. The first thing that really comes to mind for me is my daughter, who's in grammar school, 5th grade. And you take a kid to grammar school in 2022, man. And you grew up when I grew up. Like, they got something in her school called Popcorn Friday. Yeah, you're going, what's that? I know. Fucking Popcorn Friday. They get a little bag of popcorn, right? They walk into a DJ in the parking lot and they dance their way into grammar school, right? Yeah, right? And you grew up in the 80s, you were like, what the fuck, right? We didn't have that shit, right? Like the best we had when we grew up was like, we had like scoliosis day, right? That was the scariest day of the year, wasn't it? No matter who you were, man, you were like, shit, fucking scoliosis day. I know I got it. I know I got it. I know I got it, because nobody was confident they didn't have it. No one was looking at their own back the day before, like in a mirror. Yeah, look at my spine. Is it curved? Scoliosis day tomorrow. How am I doing? How am I doing? And they would announce it as soon as you came in to school. The principal would come on, right? This is the principal. Today is Scoliosis Day. We need everybody to report to the all-purpose room at 9 a.m. for scoliosis tests. Right? Yeah. That's how our schools were back then. We had all-purpose rooms. Our schools weren't nice like they are now. We didn't have the gymnasium, the lunchroom, and the auditorium, right? We didn't have auditoriums. You go to a kid's school now, it's like a mini Carnegie Hall in every school. We had the all-purpose room, right? It was for all purposes. Everything went on there. We ate shitty food for lunch, right? We got hit in the face by dodgeballs, and we got molested in there, right? Sorry, young people, if you get a little uncomfortable here, but there was a lot more molestations when we grew up, all right? It was like today's peanut allergy.
This week's episode has been brought to you by Doherty & Company Insurance Services for all your business and personal insurance needs. Our friends at Tennis Addiction in Exton, PA. And the Malin Agency, where exceeding expectations is how they do business.